We're in a lockdown in the UK. We just had some figures. How's it going? I mean, this is such a difficult and complicated way, of handling this pandemic. And I know you've criticized the government in the past, but is there anything that they're doing well?
Well, I would certainly say that we have public servants right across our country, and indeed many working in the private sector, who've been striving so hard to get us through this crisis. I have to be honest and say I don't feel that always central government, unfortunately, in the UK has backed them to really achieve what they could do. And we've had a long-running problem, in particular in the UK, with test, trace and isolate, where actually those services delivered by public health services have been very, very effective, reaching very large numbers of people. But unfortunately, central government hasn't changed its approach until really quite recently. So, I'd certainly say there are positive things happening in the UK, but I do think our central government needs to take a different approach.
What worries you in terms of the approach that's being taken now? Are we, just biding time, waiting for the vaccine that we heard about this week? Or do you worry about small businesses? Do you worry about furlough programs?
Well, I suppose my biggest worry is that we've seen quite a last-minute approach to decision-making from the UK government, whether we're talking about public health challenges or indeed about economic ones. So we called on the Chancellor to provide a medium-term perspective on wage support, for example. We called on him repeatedly. It was only announced then after the lockdown had come into place in the UK and after really quite large numbers of jobs had been lost. So we need to have that longer-term perspective. I think it's really important that we don't just bide our time and wait until the vaccine comes into play. We've got to sort out test, trace and isolate, but we've also got to make sure that that vaccine can be delivered effectively, deal with the problems that applied in the UK previously around delivery of test, trace and isolate, and learn from them in advance of that vaccine being put into place, and also have that medium-term plan for economic support so that businesses really do have more of an idea around what the situation is going to be into the future.
How can you give them the certainty of what the idea looks like? Is what would be useful for businesses right now, given the uncertainty that, frankly, we just don't know what the number of cases are going to do in the next 2 to 3 months?
Well, you're right. We don't have certainty around the exact trajectory of this disease, although, of course, that can be impacted by many public health measures that we've seen put into place by different countries. But we can have certainty from government around what will happen, what support will be there when different sets of restrictions are put into place. We've had really quite a chaotic approach, unfortunately, in the UK around this. We had what was described as a tiered system before we went into lockdown. Now, those tiers and their introduction weren't, it appeared, determined by clear sets of criteria. There was a lot of confusion around what business support would then be provided for areas that went into so-called Tier 3, which was a system where there were quite high levels of restriction. That led to huge amounts of uncertainty for businesses. It's bad enough, I think, as a business owner, not knowing whether from one day to the next you're going to have your business closed. But it's even worse when you don't know what kind of support will then be available for your business if you have to close, what support would be available to your employees. In the UK, we had a situation where the weekend before the lockdown was actually imposed, I had one employer contacting me saying he didn't know if his staff would be receiving 67% of their wage the next week, 77%, 80%, or if he would have to make his staff redundant. We can't continue like that.
Anneliese Dodds, would you be in support of actually increasing the capital gains tax?
Well, that has been suggested in some circumstances by the Office of Tax Simplification, which is a technical body that operates in the UK. I have to say that personally, I don't think it's sensible to be talking about tax changes in the immediate period. I think really we have to be focused in the UK, and particularly in the light of today's figures and what we saw earlier in the week, we've got to be focused on preserving economic activity. You know, we can have a discussion about how we tax that economic activity in the future, but if actually our economy is shrinking, if people are losing their jobs, businesses are going to the wall, businesses aren't investing and people aren't spending, then, you know, it's a rather theoretical discussion, to be honest with you. Yes, in the long term, let's look at these issues, but I think right now we've got to focus on preserving that economic activity.